How Ron Might Recount. Chapter 3. The letters from no one to Hermione after Harry shares his story. From Dave dreams of fantasy worlds, from books he's reading, audiobooks, and book reports he wished he'd done in school. So, oopsie. So you know how Harry grew up with those awful muggles, right? Ron began, leaning forward across the table in the Gryffindor common room. Turns out they weren't just horrible, they were mental. The way he told it, I'm surprised he didn't run off the first chance he got. Hermione looked up from her book, raising an eyebrow. What do you mean? Well, it all started with these letters. You'd think getting a letter wouldn't be a big deal, but for Harry, it was apparently the first time anyone ever bothered to send him anything. Ever. Sad, isn't it? Anyway, one day he gets this letter addressed to him, not just to their house, but right to his cupboard under the stairs. Can you believe that? Those muggles were making him sleep in a cupboard. Disgusting, Hermione muttered, shaking her head. Right, so Harry's all excited to open the letter, but his uncle, you remember the giant lump of a man at King's Cross, snatches it away before Harry can even read it, and from there it just gets madder. Harry said more letters started showing up, one after another. Every time his uncle tried to stop them, the letters just got cleverer. First, they were in a letterbox. Then they started coming through the fireplace. At one point, they even stuffed a dozen of them inside eggs. Can you imagine? His aunt opened the carton, and bam, letters flying everywhere. Hermione's eyes widened. Eggs? That's a brilliant bit of magic. Yeah, well, Harry said his uncle didn't think so. The bloke went completely spare, packed up the whole family, Harry, Dudley, the lot of them, and drove off, thinking they could outrun the letters. But get this. They went to some run-down hotel, and the next morning the manager came knocking with hundreds of letters, all addressed to Harry. Even there the letters found him. Ron leaned back, shaking his head in disbelief. At this point you'd think they'd just let him read the bloody thing, right? But no. His uncle decided they'd go to the middle of the sea, literally. They ended up in this shack on a rock during a storm. Harry said it was falling apart, but there they were, huddled together like a bunch of loonies. He was sitting there, counting down the minutes to his birthday, probably thinking, great, another miserable year with these nutters. When boom! Hermione jumped slightly at Ron's sudden outburst. There was this massive crash at the door. Harry said his uncle grabbed a shotgun like that was going to do anything, and then the door practically exploded open, and who's standing there? Hagrid! Ron grinned, throwing his hands up. Hagrid walks in, bends the gun like it's a twig, and tells Harry he's a wizard just like that. Can you imagine? Hermione smiled faintly. Hagrid must have been a sight after everything Harry had been through. Oh, absolutely. Harry said he couldn't believe it at first, thought it was all a mistake, but Hagrid didn't give him much of a choice. Said he was taking him to Diagon Alley? Whether the muggles liked it or not. It was the first time anyone ever stood up to them for Harry. Ron shook his head, his voice quieter now. Can you believe they tried to hide it from him? They knew all along. His aunt and uncle knew he was a wizard, and they just kept him locked away, pretending it was nothing. It makes me sick. But I reckon that's why Hogwarts means so much to him. For us, it's just school, but for Harry, it's the first place he ever really belonged. Hermione nodded, her expression thoughtful. No wonder he's so determined. After all that, I'd probably want to prove I was more than what they tried to make me. Exactly, Ron said firmly. Then with a grin he added, still can't believe those letters. Inside eggs. I wish I'd thought of that. Fred and George would have had a field day with something like that. Hermione rolled her eyes, but couldn't help smiling. Only you, Ron.